Greetings, and welcome to this week's Real Talk. I am your host. I'm Sister Zakia Sankara Jabbar. Welcome this evening, every Wednesday. As you all know, I have a conversation. We have some real talk, uncensored truth telling in this space. And so I'm happy to have everybody join. Make sure that you hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you share this broadcast. It's going to be a pretty lively one. And if you're new to us, hit the subscribe button so you can get the subscription. And every time we go live, you'll be aware of what we're doing. Tonight, I have a very special guest. Bishop Talbert Swan is with us. Hi, Bishop. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I am doing well. I'm really, really excited to have you here, and particularly about this topic that we're talking about, politics. So I have been following you for a very long time. I really, really appreciate your style. I appreciate your advocacy and appreciate all the work that you're doing in this space. And I saw something that was a couple of weeks ago, because some of these things I have been feeling as well. And one of your posts, listed all of the accomplishments, right, of this current administration for particular groups of people. And then, we get to Black people, and it's like the Whoopi Goldberg phase. You got something for me? So,
right.
Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience? Tell people a little bit about you, and let's just get right into it. I want to know what inspired that post.
Well, I'm a pastor,
Right.
an activist, a father, and just a concerned citizen in terms of the plight of Black people, both here in this nation, but across the diaspora, across the entire world. And for many, many years, I've always advocated honoring the sacrifice of our ancestors in terms of exercising our right to vote. I mean, the reality is men and women bled and died so that we would have that right. And the pushback I would always give was against those who were saying, listen, Black people have nothing to vote for. The Republicans promulgate a racist agenda, but the Democrats neglect and take Black people for granted. So, it's six of one, half dozen of another, two wings on the same bird. So just don't vote at all. And I would push back against that, because I felt like that would dishonor our ancestors. And the difficulty right now is really, how do I continue to push back against that narrative when we're seeing over and over again Democrats really playing right into what's being spoken by those who hold that opinion. And so you see over and over again various demographic groups who have their concerns addressed in a very substantive way. And here's the reality. Democrats would not have the White House. They would not have the Senate. They would not have the House if it were not for Black voters. And we need to be very unequivocal and clear about that. And I get that you needed white votes, you needed Latino votes, you needed votes of various other communities. But the reality is, you didn't flip Wisconsin without Black voters in Milwaukee. You didn't flip Georgia without Black voters in Atlanta. You didn't flip Michigan without Black voters in Detroit. And you didn't flip Pennsylvania without Black voters in Philadelphia.
And Pittsburgh, yeah.
Exactly. That's the reality of where we are. And
Right.
then Joe Biden says to the Black community, and let's not forget, we can go back even before the general election and say, if it wasn't for Black voters in South Carolina that turned the whole tide of the primary, he never would have got through that.
That's right. That's right.
And so then he comes and he says to the Black community, I owe you. You had my
Right.
back, and
Right.
I owe you. And
Right.
so my question is, when you going to pay up? Because you
That's right.
paid the Asian communities with a $5 billion anti-Asian law.
Right.
You paid the LGBTQ community on your first day in office when
First
you
day.
signed an executive order protecting LGBTQ community.
Right.
You've advocated for reparations for Holocaust survivors.
Right.
You recently made sure that you allocated $500 million to take care of Afghan refugees. And
Yep.
yet you don't even want to have a conversation about reparations. We
For
don't even
black
want to
folks. Right.
we don't even want to talk about any legislation that is specific for the demographic that has been the most faithful, the most dependable in the Democrats' corner,
For
and
decades.
who are responsible for putting you in office. And that's where we are now. And so we've got to push back hard against that to say, hey, you know what? Don't come running to us in 2022 telling us how important it is for us to come out and vote, because we got to
Right.
make sure the Republicans don't get back in office. But
Right.
you haven't been able to deliver to us anything. We're voting
Right.
rights at. You won't get rid of the filibuster to make sure we get voting rights. Where's the George Floyd,
Police.
Justice
Yep.
and Policing Act?
Right.
You took qualified immunity off the table.
Table.
You
Yep.
gave more money to police. How
Right.
you gonna push and say you support Black Lives Matter, and then you give more money to the police?
Right.
So all in all, Democrats are failing left and right. And
Yes.
here's the other thing. I'll say this. Let you get to your next question. You can push back against the failure of Democrats without agreeing with Republicans. So for
That's
those of
right.
you who want to say, "Oh, you must be a Trumper," check the
Right.
record. "Oh, you must, be a Republican supporter." No, not a report, not a supporter, not a sympathizer. I'm a supporter of Black people. And
That's
whether
right.
it's Republicans or Democrats that are taking Black people for granted, they're all getting called to the carpet.
That's right. That's right. I mean, you bringing it tonight. I mean, at the top, you said I'm a pastor, and you preaching right now for me because everything you said is absolute truth. And I was talking to a friend of mine earlier. He was excited. In fact, he's in the comments now, Brother Maurice. We were talking earlier, and he said, I really appreciate Pastor, and I appreciate the advocacy that you do because I have been attacked because I was clear even before the election, even during the primary, I was clear. I said, if the Democrats set it up to where Joe Biden is the nominee, I'm not going for it. We know who Joe Biden is, right? We know about the crime bill. I get it. Trump is horrible, all of that. But here's the thing. Joe Biden had run for president 3 times before, and the Democrats never picked him because of his record. He
Mhm.
he was he was known as being a racist. He was friends with other Republicans, and we see what he's doing now. So everything that you point out, nobody should be surprised if you knew his history.
Well, here's the reality. No one um, who whose politics were the left of the conservatives was excited about Joe Biden. Nobody
Not
was.
at all. Right.
The reality is this: Black people voted not for Joe Biden; they
Right.
voted against Donald Trump.
Right.
That's what happened. They
Right.
voted against Donald Trump. We
Right.
know Joe. When Joe
Right.
says, Joe and I know you, yeah, we do know Joe Biden.
Right.
Joe Biden was the architect of modern mass incarceration.
That's exactly
He
right.
he was the promulgator and the author of the 94 crime bill.
That's right.
Joe Biden, excuse me, is the guy who, when Republicans would put forth bills, crime bills, who would say it's not tough enough. He was the Democrat telling Republicans they weren't being tough enough. Joe Biden is the one who would stand up in the Senate and talk about Black people in the barrios and so-called ghettos, and regardless of the fact that they may have had a tough life, they need to be put away. There was no second chances or anything like that when it came to Joe Biden.
Right.
um, but because Joe Biden was selected by Barack Obama to be his vice president,
Right.
Black folk kind of gave him a pass, especially
Oh yeah.
new generation black folk who
Right.
really don't know the history from the crime bill and how when the crime bill was passed, within 10 years of the passage of the crime bill, mass incarceration doubled
Yep.
in the United States, and mostly with black people.
Right.
Uh, and then Biden has shown those colors over and over again on the campaign trail.
Right.
While Bill Clinton was saying the crime bill was his biggest mistake,
Right.
while Bobby Rush and others who were part of the Congressional Black
Right.
Caucus who
Right.
supported the crime bill were saying that was the biggest mistake they ever made. Joe
Right.
Biden was still defending the
Right.
crime bill. He
Right.
was trying to blame mass incarceration on the states without being honest enough to say, wait a minute, the crime bill incentivized the states. The Truth
Right.
in Lending Act incentivized them that if they gave tougher sentences and longer sentences, that they would literally pour billions of dollars into their states for
And they
corrections
did.
and to build prisons, which is exactly what they
Exactly.
did.
That's
And
exactly
he's
what they
been
did.
showing his colors now. Joe Biden said, hey, you know what? Take some of the COVID-19 money, put it in your police departments.
Yes, he
Joe
did.
Biden is the guy who is saying, we're not for defund the police. No, we're
Yes,
not
he
for
did.
that. And then just this week, Joe Biden nominates Rahm
Rahm Emanuel.
Emanuel to be the ambassador to Japan. And Rahm Emanuel covered up one of the most heinous murders in Chicago history, the
Laquan
murder of
McDonald.
Laquan McDonald, where a
Yep.
cop put 16 bullets in the back of a teenager. Rahm Emanuel knew what was on that video.
Yes.
He knew that the police officer would be indicted if that video was released. He covered up, hid that video for a solid year so he could run and
For
get
realism.
elected.
Yep.
And then to try to save face, he dismisses the police chief the day before the video gets released because he already
Right.
knows what's on the video. Right.
Right.
But this is the guy you're nominating for your administration. It's like spitting in the
It's,
face.
it's spitting in our face. Yes. He's very disrespectful. And, I caught a lot of flack. You and I talked, backstage before we went. I caught a lot of flack for being very critical during the election time. And I was sharing with Maurice. I said, I wish I could have had Bishop on then. I said, but you know what? Strategically, I said, it's good for us to have this conversation now because now we have what, 7, 8, almost 9 months of this presidency.
Yeah.
That we're dealing with, and you just laid it out. He's continuing to support the police, right? He said that he's not giving any serious consideration to HR 40, right?
Mhm.
HR 40 is supposed to be one of the Congressional Black Caucus, one of their priorities,
Yep.
right? And we can't even for years get reparations passed, which we know is deserving. We talk about the racial wealth gap, right? We talk about these tent cities. I live in the DC region. DC is full of Black men who are homeless. And it's a silent epidemic because who is advocating for the Black men that society has thrown away?
Mhm.
And that's very, very concerning. And again, we're talking about Joe Biden. DC is a city that has been run by Democrats for about 40, 50, 50 years now.
Yeah.
And they have Black leadership. And I saw that you put some pressure on the Congressional Black Caucus as well. I think these are the conversations that we have to have before the next election, right?
Yeah.
Because for us, and I actually supported Ice Cube, even though I know a lot of people was like, well, he's a rapper. Who do you think he is? But we should have an agenda that we say,
Mhm.
can you support this for my vote? We cannot continue to be used by a party who is not taking us serious, right? They're not giving us any policy to change our material conditions. Black people are in an emergency. We have been in an emergency. And with the continuation of the innovation with technology, we're going to lose a lot of jobs in the next 10 years. What is going to happen to the Black community if we continue doing the same thing, Pastor, and expecting a different result? What is going to happen?
Well, that's insanity. Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and
Right.
expecting different results.
Right.
Here's the reality. You talked about HR 40,
Right.
and the shame in that is HR 40 is only talking about the study of reparations.
Right.
Um,
Right.
we don't even need to study it. We know it's old. It's a
We
debt
need to pay it,
that is
period.
old.
Right.
Now here's the thing: when COVID hit, um, and people started dying, but most of all, it had an economic impact.
That's right.
When jobs started shutting down, people started sheltering in place, and it had a detrimental effect to the economy. All of a sudden, the same America who for years had been saying, we don't have the money to pay reparations to the descendants of Africans that were enslaved.
Right.
They found $2 trillion under a pillow
Come
somewhere,
on. Come
you
on.
know,
And
to, to,
still printing
to
money.
right, to be able to, give stimulus checks and all kinds of other stuff. And we know how corrupt that process was, because at the end of the day, the first wave, PPP loans and stuff, were going to billionaires and millionaires,
Right.
while black
Right.
businesses that needed it were locked out of the
Shutting down.
process.
Yep. We
Um,
lost thousands, 40,000 black
yes,
businesses.
yes. And when we talk about closing the wealth gap, we're talking about being able to invest in our community, to
Right.
close down payday lending, predatory lending practices, redlining, which still happens,
Still happens.
to this day, um, and to really invest in our communities. And I'm not talking about one $600 or one $1,200 check.
Right.
When they were going for the second wave of stimulus checks, there were a number of us that were pushing for $1,200 a month checks
Right.
through the rest of the pandemic.
Right.
Um, Biden comes in promising $2,000 checks, and then they turn around and they give $1,200 checks. They renege
Right.
on that promise. Um, there's no significant investment in black businesses for technical assistance or
Right.
to ensure that they have the infrastructure to succeed. And we've got to stop with these rising tide lifts all boats proposals,
It doesn't
and
work.
then try to say, well, that's going to help black people too. No,
Right.
we don't want black people to. We want you to be very specific. Like you said, I'm doing signing this for the LGBTQ community. I'm
Right.
signing this for the
The
Asian
Asian
Pacific
community.
Islander
Yep.
community. I'm
Yep.
signing this for the transgendered community. I'm signing
Right.
this for Afghan refugees. I'm doing this for DACA. I'm doing this for immigrants. How come you can do specific things for every other
Everybody else.
demographic that supports the Democrat Party, but when it comes to black people, even other black people,
Right.
say, no, we can't do that.
Right.
Even the vice president says, I'm not going to do anything specific for black people.
Black people.
No,
Right.
even black elected officials. When when James Clyburn was asked, what specifically do you want to see Joe Biden do for the black community? What are you
Right.
looking for? Now that you successfully got him in office, he said nothing. I don't want anything.
Right.
What the hell do you mean?
What the
You
hell
don't
do you
want
mean?
anything. What is going on? And
Yeah.
so we've got to ask the question, how serious are you about your black constituents? Because when America loses its mind, or at least the left loses its mind, when
Mhm.
Tim Scott, a black Republican, says America is not a racist country,
And
that's what
then Kamala turned around and said the same
right,
thing.
right. That's what he's supposed to say. That wasn't no surprise.
Right.
But then 24 hours later, Kamala Harris says it.
She
Then
sure
Joe
did.
Biden says it.
Yep.
Then James Clyburn says it.
Yep.
But then the same Democrats that were dragging Tim Scott for filth
Right.
was silent. You could hear rat pee on cotton. You know,
My
they,
grandma used to say that.
they had nothing to say when all of
Right.
these Democrats came out parroting the same
Same
ridiculous,
thing. Nobody said
asinine
anything.
talking point that
Right.
America is not a racist country, that it's just pockets of racists here and there. So you really, James Clyburn, are going to seriously deny that systemic racism exists in America
Right, right,
today?
right,
And so
right.
then, so we have to ask the question, how do Black people take this Democrat Party serious? Because
Yeah.
they've got to get to a point where your major selling point cannot just be, well, we're not the
The
Republicans.
Republicans, right.
And that's their major selling point right now.
That's it.
We're
That's it.
not as bad as the Republicans. And
Right.
Black people are weary of the
Yes.
lesser of two evils
We're
mantra.
tired. We're
Yeah.
tired. We're tired. We're absolutely tired. And Bishop, you telling the truth. You preaching the right thing right now, because I'm getting ready to show the audience now the policy that the Democratic Party have been using towards Black people for the last several decades. There's an actual policy, and it's called benign neglect. In short, it's a concept, right, where the intents and purposes suggested that social programs that were endorsed and funded by the federal government created attitudes of so-called dependency among African Americans, right? So basically, it's what happened during the first election, where actually it was against Trump and Hillary ran. There was, I don't know if you remember this, Bishop, but I remember there was a memo that was emailed to some higher ups in the Democratic Party, and that email got leaked to the media, right? And the response from the Democratic National Committee is to say, all you do is listen to them, because what happened was they were showing up protesting at their events, at Hillary's, at Trump's, at everybody, saying y'all are not talking to Black people, and you're not talking about the police murder that's happening in our community. And I looked at that and I said, people are still going to vote for her, even though, right? She sat up there and said that we're not going to give a response. We're not going to give them anything. We're not going to respond. That was literally the official position of the Democratic National Committee. Do you remember that?
I remember it.
I remember.
And even today,
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw it, and I'm drawing a blank on her name. What's the young lady, that young Black lady who was was one of the major spokespeople for Bernie Sanders campaign?
Oh, Bree.
Okay.
You talking about Brianna? Yeah.
So she was caught on video saying how tired they were of hearing people ask, what's your Black agenda? What's your Black agenda? Right. And she says, literally, what I was tempted to do was basically put our campaign agenda, all of our bullets and talking points on paper, and just put Black agenda at the top of it.
I heard her say that.
So in other words, what she was admitting is we didn't have a Black agenda, and we didn't care about having a Black agenda. Right. And we were just BSing Black people altogether. Now, this is supposed to be the progressive wing of the Democrat Party. So you got the establishment Democrats that we know, take Black folk for granted
all the time.
This is supposed to be the progressive wing of the party that doesn't care about Black folks. So all in all, Democrats are saying, regardless of what their ideology is within the construct of the Democrat Party, Black folks are not a priority when it comes to policy and practice. We only need y'all when it comes to voting for us and keeping us in office.
Yep, that's exactly right. And I experienced that. I experienced that as an advocate for education justice at the time I was living in Ohio. And I don't know if you watched the recent race with Nina Turner.
Yes.
Yeah, I was very, very disappointed. I knew that the Ohio Democratic Party was very racist because of my experience. I started off in the NAACP as well. I was in the youth group for the Dayton chapter of the NAACP many years ago as a teenager. And I did work with the Democratic Party as well, working to get Democrats elected at the local level. And I remember, Bishop, when we would have young, like millennial Black folks, they come before, mostly, the local Democratic Party in Dayton was ran by all these old white people. They would always sit on the committees, where they would go screen and decide who they would endorse. And I looked at every time somebody progressive, somebody like a sister like Nina Turner came and said, this is what my priorities are. This is what the needs are of West Dayton. We see Black people are dealing with not having grocery stores. We see hospitals have closed. They're trying to close schools in Black neighborhoods in Dayton. I am running to make sure that we revive our neighborhoods. And I would watch, they would scream, and I'm like, oh my God, I know they're going to pick this person. They would pick the most mundane, almost Republican white person to endorse to become mayor. So I was always the nemesis, and she's still the mayor of Dayton, Ohio now, Nan Whaley. I was always her nemesis because I knew that she did not care about Black people. It was only about the votes. And so my stance is that, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, Bishop, because I think we do, as Black people, have to make a decision. I think that before this 2022 election, and certainly before the presidential election, people like you and others need to come together, right? And we need to create and add on to a plan and an agenda and make the demand before they even try to come to our community to say, we need y'all to get out again. You know, the Republicans, they're going to try to get Trump back in there. They're going to use Trump again because I guess Trump is planning on running again. So they're going to still use the same scare tactics. I think that we cannot, in this moment, because of what's happening in the economy, Bishop, because we see the economy is quickly changing because of COVID. Lots of things are going online. They're even talking about digital currency. Our people are going to be left behind if we do not do something and intervene immediately. I would love to hear your thoughts about what we could be doing as a community before the next election. Yes.
Well, you know, as Malcolm said, you've been hoodwinked.
That's right.
Bamboozled,
right.
led astray, run amok. Right. That's what's happened to Black America when dealing with the Democrat Party. For 4 years, liberal white folks painted themselves as resistors.
Yep.
They painted themselves as woke.
Right.
They painted themselves as allies.
Right.
To that community because Trump was in office.
Right.
Now, given, yes, Trump was a virulent bigot, but we done dealt with Trump before. I mean, every generation of Black folks deals, whether it's a Bull Connor or a George Wallace or a Donald Trump. We deal with Trumps all of the time. Black folks
all the time
can survive a Trump.
That's right.
But they wanted to pretend that racism just started at Trump's election. Trump was a symptom of a greater problem that had existed the whole time.
The whole time.
But liberal Democrats didn't give a hamburger about systemic racism, about white supremacy, anti-Black bigotry, and about the plight of Black people before Trump got in office. What was the major difference when Trump got in office? Did police brutality exist? I mean, come on. Trayvon Martin,
killed under. He was killed under. Exactly.
Obama
was president.
Mike Brown.
Yep, Obama was president.
You know, and I can go. Sandra Bland. I can go on and on. Were all murdered while a Black man was in the White House.
That's
the Black Lives Matter movement started at the death of Trayvon, picked up steam at the death of Mike Brown, all under Obama and Joe Biden's watch.
That's right.
It didn't start with Donald Trump.
Right.
Yes, Donald Trump was more brazen, more in your face with it, but he was doing what white America had always done and what Democrats were perfectly comfortable with as long as a Democrat was in office.
Right.
All of a sudden, they became resistors. I've said the whole time when Trump was in office, we're going to see when Trump is no longer in office, how much of a
I said the same thing.
Y'all really are.
Yep.
Because here's the difference. Black people cannot opt out of the movement. We can't opt out of resisting. Because no matter who's in office, I'm still Black. White folks can jump in and opt out whenever they feel like it. They can jump in on this issue, jump out on that issue, whatever they want to do.
Right.
And they have shown their true colors now that he is not in office. There's no urgency around white supremacy and
Right.
systemic racism. There's
Right.
no urgency anymore. What happened? I mean, did something miraculous happen on January 20th, 2021, that racism all of a sudden disappeared? All of the urgency, to deal with these issues that existed under Trump,
Yep.
all of a sudden dissipated and disappeared. And the same white liberals who used to clap and celebrate me for 4 years every time I went after Trump, every
Right.
time I went after his administration, his policies. Oh, I just love Bishop Swan. All of a sudden now that I'm going after Biden and checking Kamala and Clyburn and
Tell
these
it.
crazy Democrats that are talking about America is not racist.
Tell
Oh,
it.
I'm a Trumper now.
Right.
Now I'm divisive and
Right.
all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And they've been, I'm unfollowing you. Bye. See you later. Because I've always been down with black people, not
That's
down
right.
with a particular party.
Right.
Okay. And whoever works in the best interest of black people, that's who I'm down with. So black
That's
folks
right.
have to get on board with an agenda that
Yes.
supports themselves. And here's what I say we need to do. We need to focus heavily on local politics, because
I
here's what
agree.
we do. We run out and make noise, in terms of the national politics every 2 years for the midterms, every 4 years for the
For the
president.
president. Yep.
And you have folks who are so invested in the national politics, but don't know who's on the school board in their local city.
Talk about
Don't know
it.
who the district attorney is, don't know who represents them on their
The
select
city
board or
council.
on their
Right.
city council.
Right.
And we've got to focus on those races that affect the quality of life of black people on a day-by-day basis. The
That's right.
mayor,
Oh
the
man.
the district attorneys, the
Right.
city councils, the
Right.
school board. Our school board just voted to a year ago. I leaked a video of a Puerto Rican officer beating a black kid in school, and
Oh
the
my
result of
God.
that leak, the result of me leaking that, he was prosecuted and was convicted back in September, not only of the assault,
Thank you.
but of falsifying the police report. In response to that, the school committee voted to give the police access to the videotapes. And it was a Puerto Rican woman who voted with 3 white guys to get that passed. 3 black women voted against it. So now the police have access to the videotapes. So if they do beat the hell out of a black kid, they can go change and erase the tape or something like that.
Oh
Um,
my God.
th-
Wow.
this is local politics in my
This is
city. And so
local.
right now
Wow.
we're focusing on making sure we get the right people on the school board so they can get rid of this racist superintendent of schools instead of renewing his contract and deal and reverse policies like that. We've got to focus on these boards and commissions and councils and mayoralships and common councils, and those who approve the governor's appointees for judges. All of those type of things we've got to deal with on the local, because all politics are local.
That's
And
right.
so this is where I'm focusing my energy right now, because I am so miffed and disillusioned with national politics. I
I
mean,
hear
even
you.
even now, the ARPA money that has been released, our state got $5 billion. My city has $123 million. The first thing the mayor did, a Democrat mayor did
I
in
ain't
our
surprised.
city, the money is supposed to be used for the communities hardest hit by COVID. We know that's the black community here where I live. First thing
Right.
the mayor did, he spent took $3 million and bought 2 buildings downtown. Like, how the hell does that improve the quality of life for the black community hit hardest by COVID in our city? And these are monies that are coming down from the federal government that these Democrats are going to take and spend however they want to spend it if we're not watchdogging and dealing with people like that. So we've got to focus hard on these local politics.
I completely agree. We have to be hyper local, and we have to be holding, not like you said, not just the city council, because a lot of my advocacy was at the school board, and that is one of the most underrated races in most cities across this country.
Yes.
It's so underrated. You have people, Bishop, who actually will run for school board as a pathway to get to the city
City
council or
council
to
to the
get to the
mayor.
governors and the
Yeah.
mayor and all that. And when I realized that that was the game, we as an organization working in Dayton, Ohio, we would actually start having meetings with candidates who were running. What are you running for?
Hmm.
Why do you care about Dayton Public Schools with 70% black students, right? And I wanted to know, and we wanted to know the parents. We organized black parents to ask these questions.
Mm.
And one of the things, we were very, very effective for a while, but I don't know if this is happening in your city. A lot of cities are changing the way that they do a lot of things. They're making a pathway for what's called smart cities. Is your city on? Have you been hearing like rumblings about the smart cities and technology and all of these different
Yeah.
things? Are they doing that in your city? That's probably
Yep.
why he bought those buildings. And
Hmm.
so I talk about this a lot on this channel. I often host an independent researcher. Her name is Allison McDowell, and we look at the finance community and we look at education and we see how things and the politics and how things are going. One of the things that I always tell my viewers, Bishop, if you want to know how things are going, pay attention to finance media. Pay attention to what the finance people are talking about, what's
Yeah.
happening in the markets and all of these different things. And I've learned so much about politics even from that area when you listen to who really has a lot of power and who really is pulling the strings. All you have to do is look at who funded Joe Biden's campaign. That's public knowledge.
Yeah.
That's public knowledge. And you have to think about it, what are they expected to get from his presidency? I hope everybody is enjoying this. Bishop Talbert Swan is with us tonight. Make sure y'all hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure y'all subscribe. I see we got some new people in the building. Make sure you all share this with your community because Bishop is preaching tonight. He is talking about holding Democrats accountable and making sure that we're doing our due diligence as well in our local communities. I wanted to let you finish, Bishop, because I wanted to hear what you think the plan for us in terms of obviously we have to work locally, right? But what is the plan? Because they're coming. They're coming in 2022. They're gonna
Hmm.
hire all these people and pay a bunch of black groups to get us out to vote. The GOTV. I know all the language. I know how they do. I know how,
Hmm.
when 2022 come, it's going to be around March. They're going to start rolling into all these so-called swing states and all of that different thing. When they come, what should be our response?
Here's our response.
Yeah,
Um, when they come, we need to lay out all of the critical issues of concern for the black community
that's right.
and how they were handled in the 2 years prior to the midterm election.
Right.
And we need to ask them, what happened with police reform?
That's right. The
Why
police
did
still
you
killing us.
why did you sell out on qualified immunity? Why
Right.
did you sell out on defund the police? Why did you give more money to the police out of
Right.
COVID funds that
Right.
should have been earmarked for our community? How did
Right.
you fail so miserably um, on the stimulus packages?
Right.
We need to ask them, how come? If you talk about the voting rights, think about this.
Mm-hmm.
When Trump first got in office, they gutted the Voting Rights Act in 2013. Trump got in office in 2016. The Democrats said, give us the House. Give us the House in 2018. We voted, we gave them the House in 2018. So they've been in control 2018, 2020, and yet nobody's fixed the Voting Rights Act. Um, nobody's fixed the Voting Rights Act. Nobody's dealt with police reform. So on all major issues, nobody's dealt with reparations. Um, on all major issues that affect our communities, they failed. And so our question to them is, why the hell should we vote for you in 2022? Because the narrative is always, well, just if you give us control in this election, then we'll take care of it. That's what they said after 18.
All
They
the
didn't do
time.
nothing for us. That's what they said after 2020. And so far, they haven't done anything specific for us. And so it's the same game. They keep kicking the can down the road. We'll get to y'all after the 2022 election. Then it's going to be, we'll get to y'all after the 2024 election. And we've got to be prepared. And see, this is uncharted territory for me. Like I said, I've always been an advocate for voting across the board. But I'm moving now more toward, understanding and not pushing back against those who say, you know what, vote down ballot. Let the chips fall where they may in the national elections. Vote down ballot for the concerns in your individual communities.
Yep.
Where your kids go to school, where you live, and deal with those particular issues, and
Right.
let the National Republican Party have to flail and and sit in the minority and watch the Republicans run the nation until they can do right in respecting the concerns of Black people. I think that might be where we have to be, you know,
Wow. I'm with it. I've been
in this
there.
coming election,
Yeah.
especially, they don't have too much longer to prove something to us. But so far in the 8-9 months that they've been in office, they've managed to break off a little piece for everybody else. We still
Everybody else.
standing here in line waiting for our piece of the sweet potato pie, and
Yep.
we ain't got it yet. We put y'all in the kitchen. We can't get a piece of the pie yet.
Right. Right. And that's a problem. And what you were describing, I had to put it back up on the screen. Here this definition here says benign neglect is a national race policy whereby the federal government does nothing more than allow the massive civil rights progress of 1960s to take effect on paper. In
Mm-hmm.
essence, the concept of benign neglect ultimately, and this is what happens, blame the victim and thus ignore the effects of the flawed structure of society in this nation. That is exactly how they treat Black people. This
Mm-hmm.
definition is what you just got done describing, period. And that is the policy, and it's a quiet policy, right? They don't advertise it. They don't necessarily say, well, we just gonna sit around and we're not gonna do nothing for y'all. No, they lie to us when it's time to vote because they know in many critical areas Black people matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our vote matters. And the thing of it is, as you said, I actually have already been there. I've already said vote down ballot. I've already said you have a right to vote, write in a candidate for whoever, for these big races that they want to come and tell us to vote for, but then don't want to take the agenda that we present to them.
Mm-hmm.
Vote in your down ballot races, vote for judges. Make sure not only vote, we need to be in the process of cultivating and running people in
Yeah.
our local community. You see what I'm saying?
Look,
Running people.
we've got
That's what we
we've
need to
got
do.
right now, my wife is working with a group who's got a slate of Black people that are running for office that
Beautiful.
we're trying to get in on the school committee and the city council
Beautiful.
in our city. And in 2 years, when the mayor's race is up, we're targeting that race as well. And so we're focusing heavily on what's happening here, because even right here, when we look at the crime rate here, when we look at the poverty, when we look at um, the condition of the Black community here, there has never, ever been a Republican. Well, let me take that back. There was one recently. There's been one Republican mayor since the 1960s
Wow.
in our city. Matter of fact, the same mayor who was mayor in the 60s came back and ran in the 2000s and won, Charlie Ryan. So we've had the
Wow.
same one Republican mayor. Everyone else has been a Democrat. And so they can't blame the condition of this city on Republican policies.
No.
We've got a police commissioner right now who, check this out. Now, this, I don't want to take up too much time on this, but
No, you're good. Yeah. I want to hear
listen,
about it.
we have a police department where 15 officers currently, right now as I speak, are being prosecuted by the Massachusetts Attorney General. And that's after the district attorney failed to even file charges against them. We pushed for her to do an investigation, and each of them were indicted for beating Black men, Latino boys, filing false police reports, etc. The Department of Justice under Trump did an investigation into the police department in our city and found that it has a pattern of using excessive force and brutalizing Black people in our city.
And see, all of that don't make national news. We don't even hear about all this stuff.
They are currently in negotiations with the city to mitigate the issues and the constitutional violations that were found in the DOJ report. And this was the only city that was investigated during the entire Trump administration. The only city. Okay, so we got the DOJ report, the negotiations with them right now, 15 officers being prosecuted as we speak. They've hired a former Black Supreme Court justice from Massachusetts to be the consultant to try to help them turn this police department around. And the white 40-year woman who is the police commissioner has the audacity to tell a group of Black seniors that she was meeting with, who wanted to meet with her about their concerns, that there is no systemic racism in the Springfield Police Department.
Oh
my
God!
That nobody has white privilege or any of that kind of stuff. And we're looking at the mayor sideways like, wait a minute, how do you get forced by us to declare racism as a public health issue? And then your chief is saying it don't exist in the city. So we're pushing for her to be dismissed. And the mayor is saying, I support her 100%. Now, and this is a Democrat mayor. Now, wait a minute. How you going to support her 100% when she's saying racism don't exist?
Right.
You know, this is the kind of in-your-face disrespect that we get from elected Democrat officials, from the local to the national, from him supporting this police chief to Biden nominating Rahm Emanuel, spitting in our face. They spit in our face at the local, the state, and the national level all the time. Then they turn around and say, vote for us because we're better than the Republicans.
That's all they ever say. That's it. That is their policy. It's just, and here's the thing. The courts also have been, like you said, chipping away at the civil rights that we gained in the 60s in the Voting Rights Act, right? The lawsuit that was filed recently in Arizona, they continue to strip away and so that's why you have activist groups. And actually, there was an action here in D.C. today. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund and all the voting rights group came together and they protested. And they're basically calling on it, doing direct action and calling on Congress to pass the new bill to make sure that we have a right to vote.
Yeah, I'll be there Saturday at the Good Trouble rally.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that is happening right here in I live in the DC area. That's happening Saturday, and I know people coming in from all across the country to make sure that they advocate for this. Now, do you think you all will be successful? I am not hopeful, unfortunately.
Here's the reality: unless they bust up the filibuster,
we're
they're not going to pass it.
Right.
And Biden has already said he's not down with that. So he doesn't care about.
He basically telling you he don't care. Yeah.
He don't care about voting rights enough.
Right. Not enough. No.
But he's going to then tell us to make sure we come out. So here's my thing. What Democrats are basically saying, we're not going to vociferously fight for your rights to vote.
Right.
But then we're going to tell you that in spite of the suppression of your votes, vote for us anyway. Mm-hmm. In spite of the fact that your seniors have to stand in long lines and Georgia's made it illegal to give them some water, while they stand in a long line for 3 hours waiting to vote.
Right.
Endure all of that. Endure the disrespect. Endure the suppression. Endure all of the machinations that are put in place to make it more difficult for you to vote, and vote for us anyway. That's what Democrats are telling us.
Right.
And we're saying, the many that are saying, hell no. If you won't put any skin in the game in terms of trying to make it easier for us to vote, why the hell should we vote for you?
Right.
You know, and that's a serious question. And that's what we're going to be challenging them on Saturday. My friend, Sister Teslin Figaro, she put up this post recently and said, you know, the House passed the Voting Rights Act. Now let's see what Vice President Joe Manchin is going to do in the Senate, and let's see what Vice President Joe Manchin is going to sign it. And she said Joe Manchin got a strong pimp hand, and she was playing.
Right, she's so funny. She is hilarious.
And that's the reality of it. You know, you got one or two Democrats that holding certain things up, and Biden and them walk on eggshells around them. I'm like, y'all need to be pimp slapping Joe Manchin, but you acting like you scared of him.
But listen to this though. Listen to what's just happened, and we didn't get a chance to talk about this. There's a lot of things happening politically. Joe Manchin voted with the Republicans to strip federal money from schools that teach critical race theory.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. They passed that bill, and Joe Manchin voted with the Republicans.
Absolutely.
And that didn't get hardly any press.
Oh, and there are a number of Democrats that are parroting that narrative and jumping on that bandwagon. A lot of the so-called progressive folks, you know, jump on it. I don't know if Caitlyn Jenner is a Democrat or a Republican. She must be a Republican because
I think she's a Republican,
Trump supporter.
But she's running for governor of. Is she running for governor?
Yeah. Okay. But she's transgendered, and she fights for transgender rights, and she wants people to be progressive. But then she comes out and says, "If I become governor, I'm going to get rid of critical race theory."
Yep.
You know, so these white folks who pretend to be allies, pretend to be woke, pretend to be, you know, a progressive on both the Republican and the Democrat side are a bunch of frauds.
Yep. And critical race theory, here's the thing, is that this is my area of work is in education. Critical race theory is not taught in K through 12 education.
Has never been.
What they're really going after is that there have been successful campaigns, and one of them my husband led in Dayton, Ohio, to include, especially for a school district that's 70% Black in inner city Dayton, Ohio. We had to fight to get a Black curriculum into the school. These children should see themselves in the curriculum.
Yeah. Listen, anytime, if you open up, I know this is dating myself because they don't really have photo albums anymore. Everything is, you know, you look digital, at online now. Yeah. But it's said that if you open up a photo album, the pictures that children gravitate to are the ones with themselves in it. That's true of adults as well. They want to see themselves.
Right. That's right.
And their fight, what they've done is they have basically put anything that challenges white supremacy or speaks the truth about racism in American history or in contemporary America in the same pot and labeled it all critical race theory.
Yes, so that's exactly what happened.
If you talk about slavery, it's critical race theory. If you talk about, you know, suppressing the rights of Black people to vote, that's critical race theory. If you talk about the assassination of Martin Luther King or Medgar Evers,
critical race theory.
That's critical race theory. So anything that exposes the history of racism in America, or the systemic racism that still exists in America, they've labeled that all critical race theory. They're not banning critical race theory.
They ban the actual history.
They're banning American history.
Right.
You know, and the bottom, and I've said this over and over again, you might as well just get rid of American history. You might as
Right.
well get rid of teaching geography, because you can't teach
Right.
geography without talking about colonization and the way
Right.
white folks treated non-white folks across the world. So get
Across the
rid
world.
of geography, get rid of American history, get rid of a
Right.
number of subjects, and don't teach
Right.
any of them in the schools.
Get rid of
Uh,
civics class because you got to talk about the Voting
exactly.
Rights Act. Right.
Exactly. You got to get rid of all of that stuff.
Right.
None of that is critical race theory.
Right.
So basically they're saying teach children to love America by lying about America.
That's right. And in Tennessee, listen to this. They attach fines. Say they will take, I believe there's 1 million if a teacher is found to be teaching critical race theory. There's a threat to take the funding to the actual school district.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, these white folks are not playing. And at the end of the day, what we saw in this last election was that white women continued to vote for Trump. In
All
this
the
election,
time.
yes, the number actually went up 2 percentage
It
points from
went
the
up from
first time.
53 to 55
Yes.
percent all day. So whenever white liberal women come for me and
Mm-hmm.
start saying, stop being so divisive. You're acting
Mm-hmm.
very Trumpish. I'm like, no, your mom and them and your girlfriend and your
Come on.
sister and them and
Come on.
your hairdresser and all the other
Tell it.
white women that you around every day. They're the ones who act Trumpish, because 55% of them voted for white supremacy. So before
Period.
you lecture me on anything, go talk
Right.
to your girlfriend and stay out
Right.
my face.
Exactly. That's exactly right. No, they absolutely need to be talking to themselves. But here's the thing: they are talking to each other, right? That's why they voted the way that they do. That's why you see all of these bills popping up in these states banning critical race theory. They running all of these voter suppression bills. Like you said, the one down in Georgia, they passed it, right? They are responding to losing the election.
Mm-hmm.
And we should have known that that would be the response. What I don't appreciate, though, Pastor, is we have the Democrats who still feel like they do not have to do a damn thing for us, and that they're going to have the gall to pay a couple of 5 or 6 big box civil rights organizations, and they're going to pay organizers and dispatch them in states like Pennsylvania. They're going to dispatch them now in Georgia. They're going to dispatch them in Texas because they think they have a chance to flip these states. The problem is, though, is that you don't have what you need because you're not doing what you have to do to encourage Black people to vote for you. I'm
Mm-hmm.
with you. I actually was with you that plan when you talked about voting down ballot. I've been doing that the last actual 6 years. I started doing it after the second Obama administration, because what I saw what he did in the first 4 years, and everybody made excuses about why he couldn't do nothing specifically for us, because he also did the same thing Biden did. He got in there and did a lot of things for the LGBT community. He actually created a position. The first time in the history of the United States, there was a position in the White House for a transgender person. That's fine, right? But what about Black people?
Yeah. Listen, after the Trump administration, Black folks were fatigued.
Absolutely.
We had already
You're
dealt with
tired. Yeah.
all of the racism that we dealt with during the Obama administration.
Right.
We watched y'all tell the Black president to go back to Kenya. We watched y'all call his wife a gorilla in heels. We watched
Oh
the
God, I saw
foolishness
that.
of the Tea Party. We saw the rise of Black Lives Matter. I
Right.
hold this all the time, that anytime there is Black progress, there's always white backlash. So
Right.
we saw the progress of a Black person actually being elected president. We immediately saw white backlash with the rise of the Tea Party.
Right.
We saw it continue for 8 years, and it cascaded and culminated in the election of Donald Trump. My friend Bishop Darren Moore puts it like this: white America was so nauseated to see a Black family in the White House that they vomited, and out came Donald Trump.
Wow.
So he was the result of white backlash.
Right.
And so Black people had to deal with this
We lived through that. Yes.
this in your face racism, this There's very fine people on both sides. This
Right.
endorsement of Nazis and
Right.
the rise of in-your-face white supremacists,
Yes.
all up in the administration. We dealt with all of that. The emboldening of white folks, the
Right.
whole Karen paradigm and stuff
Right.
all happened during that time. They got big, bad, and bold, confronting black folk in public, calling the cops on us everywhere,
All
all
the
of that
time.
kind of foolishness. And
Yep.
so black people rose up.
Yep.
They gave Democrats the White House. They gave them the House.
The Senate.
And
Yep.
then they were bold enough to give them 2 seats in
In
Georgia.
the Senate.
Split,
Yeah.
split Georgia and gave them 2 Senate seats. And
Yep.
you better believe that white backlash is coming. It's already
Oh, it's
coming.
coming. They
It's
already,
already
yeah.
here. So
And
that's what we've
look, the
seen.
census report. Did you see that? That just
Yeah.
came out.
And they
That's
said,
really what it is.
mhm.
Their
And
their
they
their
tried to
their
say
numbers
we
are
have decreased. Now they're giving us
decreasing.
less numbers than they did before. And I don't
Yep.
even believe that to save my life.
Yeah.
I don't believe it to save my life. But
Yeah.
this white backlash is here. And not only that, remember now, every 10 years when they do the census, not only do they do the census, but then your state legislatures do their redistricting.
They sure do. Yep.
And so when they do their redistricting, you're going to see a whole lot of gerrymandering.
Yep.
Um, those districts where you could always depend on having a black representative and all of that kind of stuff, you're going to see those lines change. And
Right.
become 2022, you may see a significant decrease in
Right.
black elected officials in the state houses and in federal seats as well.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. So, like I said, I'm with you on what you suggested for 2022 and certainly for 2024. I think that we should have an agenda prepared. I think that people need to start now. Absolutely. Don't wait until right before the election and we don't have our things together. We need to The Democrats should be engaging Black people all the time instead of hopping and flying in our communities and flying back to wherever you came from once you get your vote. I lived through that because I lived 20 years in Ohio. Ohio was a so-called purple state or so-called swing state. Unfortunately, Ohio is solidly red now. You know what I mean? And so I noticed like right before we transitioned, because my husband and I we moved back to the DC area. My husband is from Washington, DC. And I noticed after that the Democrats actually gave up on Ohio. Like they looked at the numbers. You know how they do, they crunch the numbers, they look at the survey, because what's happening is that Ohio and other places in the Midwest are losing population. Black folks like me, millennials and the Generation Z, we're all moving away from Ohio. And so when I looked at the redistricting, Ohio has lost another 2 electoral votes because they've lost population. So it's becoming, some of these states are becoming less and less relevant. And now we're seeing, Bishop, that Georgia is in play, where it was solidly red for many years. We know that the Southeast is solidly red. And most of that, though, Bishop, and you know that because Black folks are very highly populated in Georgia, in Alabama, in Mississippi. I grew up in Alabama. The reason why it's so red down there is because they are still suppressing Black people's votes.
Well,
And we see
not only that, they're still suppressing Black people's votes, and you still have Black people who feel like they don't have a reason to vote, so they will not go out and vote. When Trump won the 2016 election, you had over 500,000 registered Black voters in just Atlanta that just didn't bother to vote. Just didn't bother. And if you had out of that 500,000, if you had 50,000 of them to go vote, he would have never won that state.
That's right.
The same thing is true in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, and in other states. The margin of folks of Black registered voters who didn't vote in Philadelphia alone, was 5 times the number of votes you needed for Trump to have lost the state of Pennsylvania
Right. That's
because
right.
they felt like, we've been neglected for all these years.
Right.
My vote. And so here's the danger for the Democrats right now is disaffected black voters. You're not going to have the same level of fatigue of Trumpism that they
No.
had in 2020. That's
Can't
not
use
happening
that.
in 2024. They're
Can't
not going to
use
be
it.
fatigued from Trumpism. They're going to be fatigued from watching Democrats not deliver to our constituents. That's going to
Right.
be the fatigue of black people in 2024.
That's right. In 2022 and
Yeah.
2024. Bishop, this has been amazing. I am so glad that you came and we had this conversation. We've had a lot of activity in the chat, and people are very, very engaged. There were a couple questions in there, where people, are just like, what are we going to do with the Congressional Black Caucus? People
Mm,
are really interested, in this topic and interested in having the kind of power that we need to change our community. So I think that what you said around making sure that we're doing local advocacy, I completely support 100%. I happen to live in, a suburb of Washington, D.C., out here in Maryland, and we live in a county that's one of the wealthiest counties in the entire country. And we also have had 4 Black men just this year, Pastor,
mm,
murdered by the Montgomery County and Gaithersburg Police Department, where it's supposed to be so progressive. Everybody on the council is not only Democrat, they're actually, what people would describe far leftists. There is
mhm.
it's supposed to be such a progressive community, right? There's all these, different programs, and making sure that we're supporting different communities, and making sure that we're supporting, all the other disenfranchised folks, except for Black folks. Black folks, even in a county where it's supposed to be safe, right, are still being murdered and losing their lives. And it's not necessarily making the national news. But you're right. We do have organizations locally who are pushing for justice, for those 4 Black men who have been murdered here in our community. And we actually have the police chief who is actually Black. And we have to call for his resignation because all of this has happened under his leadership.
Yeah.
All of it.
Well, what we've learned is that black faces in white spaces don't
Woo!
necessarily make a difference
Come
because
on.
if you don't dismantle the system
Right.
that produces, endorses, and perpetuates white supremacy, putting
Right.
a black face in there, you
Right.
may increase our numbers and our representation within that construct, but it
Right.
doesn't change the system under which they have to work. And so
Not at
we
all.
we we see that happen over and over and over again.
Right.
And so yeah, we got to focus on this local stuff.
Right.
Uh, and I'd encourage black people to start there. Listen, worry about your school district, worry about your city council, worry about what the tax rate on your home is going to be, worry about the
Talk
small
about it.
businesses in your neighborhood,
Talk
uh,
about it.
and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
Because these national politicians are going to play politics. And here's my other concern is that even when you get some of the younger, allegedly more progressive politicians that go to the White House, because you had people like here in my state, Ayanna Presley, who upset
Right.
an entrenched, well liked white Republican in Mike Capuano. Um, what's happening is when some of these folks get to Washington,
Mm-hmm.
they get ingrained
The
uh,
culture. Yeah.
in the culture of your corporate Democrat
Yep.
politicians.
Yep.
We thought we were going to see some pushback to Nancy Pelosi's leadership, and all of the progressives
And it
got on
needed to
board
happen.
and put her back
They
in the
did do
leader.
it. And the Congressional Black Caucus has the power to try to do that. It's
Yeah,
58
the
of them.
CBC, it's like Nancy cracks the whip, and the
Yep.
CBC, gets right in line.
Yep.
They go down
Ain't
to
that the truth?
they go
Wow.
down
Wow.
to they went down to Tulsa, uh, and they started, line dancing. And, I mean, when you had the perfect
When I saw
opportunity,
that, oh Lord,
when you had the perfect opportunity to talk about reparations,
that's right.
and say, hey, this is the classic example of communities that should have been repaired because of the damage that white supremacy did to them. And
Right,
you only had a couple of survivors that were still
right.
alive. And a random citizen bought the one of the survivors some new Jordans. I'm like, wait a minute.
Wow,
So their whole city gets
wow.
destroyed. And here we are all these years after the Tulsa massacre, and the best America can do is give this woman some Jordans. It's insulting. And
It's very
Biden went
insulting.
down there and gave a speech and
Yep,
never talked about
reparations.
how am I going to support these families, but above that, just in general, how are we going to compensate or make good on Black families all over America that have been hurt like that? Because these are just the ones that we hear about. But
Right.
there's a whole section in the you're in DC, so in the African American Museum of cities and towns that were destroyed just like that. It wasn't just
Yes,
Tulsa and Rosewood.
it
It
wasn't.
happened to Atlanta. It happened to a number of other, Black cities and towns
Yep,
throughout history, and
yep.
they never thought twice
Never.
about compensating the Black people and the survivors and the families, who had to deal with those horrors.
Mhm. That's exactly right. Thank you, Pastor. We appreciate you, Bishop. Keep telling the truth. I'm glad that you came to spend this time with me today, and I really hope that I can have you back. I will continue to support your work and retweet and everything. But I wanted to ask for people who want to support what you're doing locally, is there a social media or a website people can go to donate to support your work?
Oh, absolutely. You can go to naacpspringfield.org. I'm the president of the local branch here. You can certainly go to our church's website. It's 413hope.org, 413hope.org. And we're doing everything from voter education to youth programming it runs the gamut. COVID advocacy, vaccine equity, all of that we're doing through our various ministries at our church. So check those out. And thank you so much for inviting me to come on. It's been a pleasure to be here.
It has been a pleasure. I want to thank all of our listeners. Thanks so much for the lively conversation in the comments. We appreciate all of you. Next week, same place, same time, every Wednesday, 8 p.m., you will have Real Talk, uncensored truth telling every single Wednesday here on Real Talk with Sister Zakiya Sankar Jabbar. Again, thanks, Bishop. You have a good evening.
You too.
Everybody, we'll see you next week. Take care.